They say if you stand on the old Cedar Creek tracks at midnight, the world changes its breath. Everything freezes, every echo dies, and something ancient begins to crawl back into this world. Some say it's the train that burned 60 years ago, still looking for the living. Others say it's not a ghost train at all, just the dead, trying to finish what the fire started. Avery Morgan didn't believe any of it. She was 23, a travel vlogger chasing rural American legends for content. Cedar Creek sounded perfect, creepy, small, isolated. Her viewers loved that. When she arrived just before sunset, the town looked empty, like everyone had evacuated hours earlier. The motel sign flickered weakly, buzzing like an insect caught in a web. Inside the lobby, dust drifted in the dim light as an old woman appeared behind the front desk. The moment she saw Avery, her face twisted with alarm. "Oh no, you shouldn't be here tonight," she whispered. Avery smiled politely and said she was here only one night. But the woman grabbed her wrist with surprising strength. "If you hear the whistle, run. If you see the light, don't look at it. Promise me." Avery didn't understand, but she nodded just to escape the fear in the woman's eyes. Her room was tiny, the wallpaper peeling like dry skin. She dropped her bag, grabbed her flashlight, and followed the forest path toward the abandoned tracks while the last sunlight bled away. The woods were unnervingly silent, the kind of silence that feels like the trees are holding their breath. When her boots touched the rust-eaten rails, the air seemed to freeze. The tracks hadn't felt a living train since the 1961 fire. She recorded everything, narrating for her viewers, though her voice trembled more than she wanted to admit. Then, a voice behind her made her spin. "You shouldn't be out here." A gaunt man stepped out from the tree line, eyes hollow and scared. "Name's Earl," he muttered. "You're the girl filming the train." Avery nodded, her fingers tightening around her camera. Earl stared down the empty tracks, face pale. "It comes back at midnight," he said softly. "Still burning, still screaming, still hungry." Avery let out a shaky laugh. "It's just a legend." He shook his head. "It needs a living soul to replace the ones it lost." Before she could ask more, he vanished into the dark, leaving her alone on the rotting rails. Back in her motel room, she tried to brush off the encounter. She edited some clips, checked the time 11:50 p.m., and felt her pulse quicken. Curiosity beat fear. She grabbed her camera again and slipped outside. The town was dark, every door locked, every window covered, as if Cedar Creek itself was hiding. At the tracks, the night felt colder than before. 11:59 p.m. Avery stood perfectly still. Then came the vibration beneath her boots, small, rhythmic, unnatural. The whistle followed. Long, low, dying. A sound pulled straight from the throat of something starving. A pale light flickered far down the rails, swelling into a blinding glow. Avery raised her camera with trembling hands. The ghost train exploded into view, half transparent, its metal blackened, flames licking through its shattered windows. Burned faces pressed against the glass, mouths frozen in eternal screams. The wind it carried felt like knives across her skin. Her camera sparked and shut off. Something icy latched around her ankle. Avery screamed as a charred child's hand clawed at her, fingers sinking through her skin like smoke. She kicked wildly until the hand dissolved back into the flames. The train screeched, slowing. It wasn't supposed to slow. It stopped. A hiss of cold steam crawled across the ground, swallowing her feet. A figure stepped off the engine, a conductor with melted skin and blank, dead eyes. A sickly green lantern swung from his hand, its light writhing like something alive. He pointed at Avery, and her chest seized. She collapsed, choking, unable to breathe, as the lantern's glow reached for her like dripping poison. "Let her go!" a voice roared. Earl burst from the trees, holding a rusted yellow lantern that glowed warm, alive. Its light shoved the green glow back. The conductor recoiled with a sharp animal hiss. Earl grabbed Avery's arm. "Run!" They tore through the forest, branches ripping at their clothes. Behind them, the ghost train shrieked and barreled through the trees, phasing through trunks, chasing them like a predator scenting blood. Avery didn't dare look back until they burst into the motel parking lot. Her knees buckled, gravel cutting her palms as she fell. Earl staggered beside her, panting. The night was suddenly still again. The train had vanished. Why did it stop? Avery whispered. Earl's expression broke. Because it marked you. It needs a living soul, and it chose you. Cold dread washed over her. You have to leave Cedar Creek before tomorrow night, he warned. If you stay, it'll come back for you. Avery left before sunrise, driving until the sky turned gray. But sometimes, on lonely stretches of road, she would hear it soft at first, then clearer, the mournful, hungry whistle of a train that should have died 60 years ago. And every time she heard it, the air around her would grow cold, as if something ancient had found her again. If you ever hear someone calling your name from a place that should be empty, don't answer. And whatever you do, don't look. I learned that the hard way in my hometown of Red Hollow, Texas, a place where a dried up well doesn't just echo, it whispers. It cries, and sometimes it shows you a version of yourself that isn't supposed to exist. The night I looked into that well, something climbed out wearing my face. And it's still out there, trying to finish what it started. Most people in my hometown of Red Hollow, Texas don't talk about the old well on the edge of town. They pretend it's just another abandoned landmark with no water, just dust and rotten boards covering the top. But everyone knows the truth, even if they won't say it out loud. Everyone knows the well whispers. And those whispers don't belong to anyone from our world. My name is Maya Holbrook, and the night I looked into that well, I saw a version of myself that shouldn't exist, one that wanted my life more than I did. The first time I heard the well, I was walking home from my evening shift at the diner. It was late, the kind of late where the Texas desert gets strangely quiet except for insects and the crunch of gravel under your shoes. As I passed the old well, I heard someone crying from deep inside. Not just crying, but begging, pleading, calling for help. A cold chill shot up my spine. I backed away fast. Everyone in town grew up hearing rumors. If you hear the whispers, don't answer. And whatever you do, don't look inside. I used to laugh at that. But hearing someone sobbing in a well that had been dry for half a century shut me up real quick. I tried to convince myself it was an animal, maybe someone messing around. But the voice, it sounded like me. I hurried home, convinced I was losing it. But the next day, the sheriff came by the diner. Another missing person, our fourth this month. This time it was a woman I knew. Quiet, kind, always early to church. No forced entry, no signs of struggle. She was just gone. And the weirdest part, people said they saw her around town earlier that day, even after she disappeared. They claimed she looked wrong, too still, too quiet. Like she was wearing her own skin instead of living in it. I should have stayed away from that well. I should have ignored it, like everyone else. But curiosity eats at you, especially when something feels personal. So that night, after my shift, I went back. The moon was bright, lighting up the desert in pale silver. The well sat in the middle of a dead patch of earth, the wooden frame cracked and leaning. I stood at the edge, listening. At first nothing, just wind. But then faint and distant a whisper drifted upward. "Maya, please." My blood froze. It was exactly my voice. My instinct screamed to run, but something pulled me forward. I lifted the wooden cover. The well was deeper than I remembered, stretching into endless darkness. And then something moved at the bottom, shifting, crawling, like shadows trying to take shape. Suddenly I heard the crank beside the well creak. The old rope pulley was slowly turning, like someone beneath was pulling on the bucket. Except no one had used that bucket in decades. The rope tightened, and the bucket began rising from the darkness. My heart hammered. I stumbled back, unable to tear my eyes away as it reached the top, and inside it was a photo of me. Not an old one taken that day. Me in my diner uniform, staring into the camera with a blank expression I knew I hadn't made. I dropped the photo and staggered back. Something grabbed the edge of the well. A hand, pale, thin, fingers too long like they had been stretched. It pulled itself up slowly. First the hand, then a forearm. Then a face that looked exactly like mine, except the skin was too smooth, like wax, and the eyes were too wide, pupils blown out like someone who hadn't seen sunlight in years. She smiled when she saw me. "Thank you," she whispered in my voice. "I've been waiting." I ran, not even thinking about direction. I sprinted through sand and brush until my lungs burned. When I finally got home, I locked every door and window. I barely slept, flinching at every sound. The next morning, my phone buzzed nonstop. People from town kept texting. "Saw you earlier. Everything okay? You walked past my shop but didn't answer. Thought you were sick. You looked pale." My stomach dropped. I had been at home, hiding, but something that looked like me had been walking around Red Hollow like it owned the place. I ran to the sheriff, breathless, stammering about the well and what I saw. He stared at me with this tired, haunted expression and told me to go home, to forget the well, to stop looking for answers. That's when I knew he knew more than he let on. That night, my doppelganger came for me. I woke up to the sound of my front door opening, not kicked in, just unlocked, quiet, deliberate. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped into the hallway, heart pounding. And there she was at the end of the hall, standing perfectly still, head tilted slightly. She looked exactly like me. Same pajamas, same messy hair, same cut on my hand from work. But her smile is stretched too wide, too calm. "You don't belong here anymore," she whispered. I backed into my bedroom and slammed the door, locking it even though I knew a lock wouldn't matter. I heard her footsteps slow, measured, like she was enjoying the moment. The doorknob twisted. I shoved my dresser against the door as the wood started to crack. Desperation hit. I opened my window and climbed onto the roof, scraping my legs on the shingles. I jumped into the dirt below, pain shooting up my ankle, and forced myself to run. I didn't look back. I didn't want to see her climbing out the same window. I ran to the sheriff's house, banging on his door. He opened it in seconds, as if he had expected me. "She came out of the well," I gasped. "It's my double. It's real." He didn't argue. He didn't even act surprised. He just grabbed his shotgun and motioned for me to follow. "I hoped you wouldn't be next," he muttered. We reached the well, the desert air unnaturally cold. The sheriff shined a light down inside. I heard whispers rising up, dozens of voices overlapping, begging, screaming, pleading, my voice among them. "We can't save them. he said quietly. "But we can stop yours from replacing you." "Mine?" I echoed, trembling. He turned toward the dark horizon. "She's behind you," I spun. My double stood 10 feet away, grin wide, walking toward us with movements that weren't quite human, too smooth, too floaty, like she was being guided by puppet strings. The sheriff fired. The blast echoed across the desert. My double staggered but didn't fall. Instead, she lunged faster than anything should move. The sheriff yelled for me to run. I did. I don't know what happened to him. I don't know if he survived. I didn't stop running until I reached the highway, tears blurring everything. A trucker picked me up. I told him I needed to get as far from Red Hollow as possible. I'm in another state now, hiding, watching my back. Every reflection makes me flinch. Every stranger's face makes me wonder if someone followed me out of the well. Last night, the motel clerk swore he saw me leave my room and walk into the desert. I didn't leave. I think my reflection is getting closer. Most people don't believe a place can be alive. I didn't either until the night I learned what really fed my family's orchard. My name is Lena Ward, and for almost my entire life, I thought the Ward family orchard in New England was just an old, beautiful farm that made unbelievably sweet apples. People would drive hours just to taste them. They'd always ask the same question: "How do you grow fruit this good?" My dad never answered. My grandmother never answered. No one in my family ever did. I used to think they just wanted to keep a secret recipe. I was wrong. They were hiding something darker, something the orchard demanded from us every single year. And last year, for the first time in more than a century, we broke that tradition. I only found out about it when Dad got too sick to keep up the farm. I was 18, finally old enough, according to him, to be told the truth. He sat me down at the kitchen table, pale and sweating, and told me our orchard required a human sacrifice every October, not metaphorically. A real person. I laughed at first. I truly thought he was delirious from fever, mixing old family legends with sickness, but he didn't laugh. The fear in his eyes wasn't something he could fake. He said the orchard was bound to our bloodline, that the land itself had to be fed. If we didn't give it someone willingly, it would take someone on its own. Even then, I didn't believe him. Not fully. Not until the signs began. The first was the ground. One early November morning, I stepped outside to feed the barn cats and noticed the soil beneath the oldest apple trees rising and falling, as if something huge was breathing underneath. I knelt and brushed away leaves. The soil was split open in long cracks, stretching like fingers. When I told Dad, he went pale and whispered, "It's starting." We broke the promise. I still tried to call him out on how insane this sounded, but that night the house made me believe him. I woke at 3 a.m. to a slow dragging sound outside my bedroom. Not footsteps, something wetter, heavier, almost like vines sliding across the floor. When I opened my door a crack, I saw roots. Thick, soil-covered roots stretching across the hallway like they were feeling their way through the dark. They scraped under the baseboards. They curled around chair legs. I slammed my door and pressed against it, listening as they searched the crack under the frame. By morning, they were gone, leaving only trails of dirt smeared across the hardwood. Dad wasn't surprised. He wasn't even angry, just terrified. He told me our ancestors planted the orchard on cursed land, and whatever spirit lived beneath the soil needed a body every fall to remain alive. The harvest depended on it. Our prosperity depended on it. And without an offering, it would come after the people who owed it a debt, our family. I begged him to let me call for help, but he grabbed my wrist and said no human being could stop it. No police, no neighbors, no one. 2 nights later, just after sunset, the house shook so violently I thought a truck had hit it. I ran to the upstairs window, and that's when I saw something that still destroys my sleep. The orchard was moving. Full-grown apple trees, 40, 50 years old, were uprooting themselves. Roots tore out of the ground like tentacles. Trunks tilted forward as if bending at the waist. Branches reached outward like arms stretching after a long sleep. The nearest trees began dragging themselves toward the house, the ground trembling with every heave. I screamed for Dad, and he tried to get up, but he collapsed. He could barely breathe. "Go," he shouted. "Lena, run." But I couldn't leave him. I pulled him up, his arms slung over my shoulders, and rushed toward the back door. The walls shuddered as the orchard closed in. Branches slapped against the windows. Leaves covered the glass like hundreds of hands pressing inward. Then the front door exploded inward, splinters flying. A massive root snaked into the living room, slamming against the floor. Smaller ones followed, spreading fast, searching. Dad pushed me back, yelling at me to run, but before I could drag him another step, the floorboards split open beneath him. Roots burst upward, wrapping around his legs and waist. He looked at me, not fighting, not angry, just filled with this awful, broken guilt. "I'm sorry," he said. "I should have told you sooner." And then the orchard pulled him down into the floor, dragging him screaming into the dark beneath the house. I ran. I didn't think. I just ran into the woods behind the property. The trees groaned behind me, actual groaning, wood stretching and cracking like bones. Roots burst from the soil and whipped at my ankles as I dodged between pines and briars. The orchard didn't want to let me go. I fell down a slope and slammed into cold dirt. My ankle twisted, but adrenaline kept me going. I crawled behind a boulder and held my breath while the roots spread across the forest feeling for me. After what felt like an eternity, they finally receded, dragging a shape behind them that I refused to look at. I waited until the forest fell silent. Then I limped 3 miles to the highway and flagged down a trucker. I told him there had been a mudslide, that my dad was trapped under the house. The police searched, but found no body. No roots, no signs of violence. Just a collapsed building surrounded by a perfectly still orchard. They called it a tragic accident. They closed the case. But I know better. Inside was a single apple, impossibly red and perfectly shaped, resting on dried leaves. Beneath it was a note written in shaky handwriting. "The orchard remembers. The harvest is overdue. I haven't opened the curtain since. Because the orchard doesn't forget the debts owed to it. And I know, one night soon, I'll hear roots sliding under the floorboards, again coming to finish what they started."